What am I to do?
Welcome to He Said, She Said Razor Branding Podcast with Michael Russo and Jaci Russo. To learn more about how to improve your brand, visit brandRUSSO.com.
Michael, our conversation with Mickie was so enlightening and illuminating around the modern era of PR. I mean, I know I have wondered why some businesses get featured in the media while others get ignored. And if PR is just for big brands or small businesses can use press releases to build credibility. But man, Mickie Kennedy used his 25 years of knowledge and experience and really helped us, I think, understand better how PR these days can help small businesses land media coverage that actually matters.
Yeah, but I don't even know if I'd call it PR, to be honest with you. It
Okay.
sounded more like media relations, really. I mean, like, how do you get your press release somewhere? How do you follow the chains to do that? And how do you write a good press release? But PR can be so much more than that, as we've learned, right? I mean, this was a specific nuance of PR, correct?
Well, I would tell you that this was PR, in my opinion, and it's how PR should be done versus just sending out stuff that writers and editors and publishers are just going to ignore.
Yeah, but that's a media PR angle versus PR like an event or like a guerrilla marketing campaign. Those are all considered PR things,
Mm,
right?
No, no. PR, as in public relations, as in press releases, that's what this is.
Well, yeah, I get that's what this is, but I think people don't always think of it that way.
I think you don't always think of it that way. I think other people think of it
No, I
exactly
think
the
I
way it
think
is.
I think it has evolved into different things. Yes. I mean, this is a huge component of it. And when you like he talked about earned media, that's something that is really hard to replace, right? It's very valuable when you have somebody
Very.
pick up a story and run with it. I'm just thinking from like branding perspective, there's a lot of different components to public relations and how people view you, how people perceive you, how you get the message out there.
Okay.
I
Well,
feel like I feel like this is not going well, this intro.
not going well for you. For me and Mickie and the listeners, we're all on the same page.
All right. I
You
thought it
just,
was very, very useful. Yes, he was very
I thought it
smart
was too.
and
Well,
he
look,
talked a lot
Mickie
about good
is the
things.
founder of eReleases, and he's really cracked the code on getting press, as in public relations, press relations, PR, without a big budget. So I
I
hope
think we
y'all enjoy.
should I think we should redo this because he's gonna hear this and be like, what the hell did I sign up for?
Well, I think he's going to wonder if you were paying attention to him talking or not.
I did. I
Did you?
yes, I did.
Okay, because what you just said is not what he and I talked about for an hour.
It is. I just found that PR, this is one component of it, right? Writing
You
press
know how
releases is
sometimes you
only
feel the need to edit everything I've said? This is one of those times where I think you may need to use that cut on you.
To do when the day is through.
Mickie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. I was excited because I pretend to understand PR, but don't enough. So therefore, we have Christina, who you met via emails and booking and all that. She is our whiz at all things public relations. But I am fascinated by it. I've always thought that it was such an integral, important part to marketing and branding. So I was hoping maybe we could start off with you talking about your role as a, and I quote, press release ninja.
Yes. Um, I think that for me, I just realized I lucked into an office job like 27, 28 years ago. And because I had writing in the background, albeit creative writing, because I just finished a Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry, they said, "Hey, you write press releases for us." And so I did that, and I had to spend a day and a half fighting a fax machine, and it held 100 numbers. I needed to fax like to 130 places. So after I programmed it with 100 numbers, I had to delete those and then program the other 30. And
Oh,
so I was sending these out and nothing was happening. And the boss, who was a telecom attorney, it was a telecom research startup, and I was employee three. He just said, "Oh, yeah, we send out press releases, but nothing ever happens." And I'm like, I'm wasting a day and a half here. This is not right. So I made it my mission to try to educate myself as to press releases, and it looked like the press releases we were sending out were fine press releases, but they weren't getting picked up. And then I just started reading articles. I looked at newspaper articles, I looked at telecom trade publications, and the one thing I realized is that the newspaper, as well as telecom trade publications, all journalists like to follow a story arc. And we were just dumping data tables. And I realized there's not a story there. And so I looked at our most recent data, which was Caribbean telecom traffic, and one country stood out at the time. I can't even recall what it was. It isn't one of the ones you would recognize, but it had more telecom traffic to and from the United States than all the others basically combined. And I asked around and found out that it was the call center for 1-900 numbers, which were popular in the early 80s. And so, and for those of you who don't know what that is, you could, get horoscopes pre-recorded for 75 cents a minute and call a specific 1-900 number, and it would just charge to your landline phone bill. This was pre-cell phones. And so you could also call and speak to a live psychic, and maybe that's $3 or $4 a minute. And there was everything from pet advice to adult lines, you name it. And so I wrote about that and the story there and accompanied it with the data. And all of a sudden, we got picked up by Financial Times, The Economist, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and 3 telecom trade publications, as well as, I think, Red Herring magazine, which was real popular then. And so, yeah, I just felt like, wow, this worked. Can I do it again? And I did. And I just got really good at it. And I saw this could really move the needle for a small business. We were getting so many customers that were outside of our normal customer base, which was previously, before that, all telecom companies and telecom lobbyists and telecom attorneys. And now we're getting orders from investment funds and people who want to know about trends, economic trends, and things like that. So I just felt like I could do this for others. And around the same time, every time I did a fax, I'd get a few journalists calling to say, hey, quit faxing now, send it by email. And I was like, oh, this is so much easier to email journalists. And that's how I started. I spent about a year just getting email addresses, networking with journalists, mostly in bulletin boards. And they would post their email addresses online. And I was just a matchmaker, sending press releases on behalf of clients to these journalists. And over the years, I pivoted. Now all of our releases go out nationally through PR Newswire, which normally charges like $1,700 for a 600-word press release, and through us, it's like about a quarter of the price. So huge savings going directly through us. The caveat is that we can't work with big, giant, publicly traded companies, the type of people that their salespeople are looking to have arrangements with. Most of our clients are authors and startups and small businesses for whom, doing 5 or 6 press releases at $2,000 each is not in their budget. So it's worked out really well for us. And I do like 10,000 releases a year through PR Newswire.
So I'm fascinated by how
Jackie,
you,
I have to pause 1 second. Do you know your
Okay.
camera's off?
my camera's off?
Yep. And I don't know why, but it's disconcerting.
Well, no. There we go.
There it
I've
is.
been facially encouraging you and talking the whole
Nope.
time and Ken,
Nope.
no.
I've texted you. I've put you in the chat. I don't know
I
what
was
else to do.
listening and
I had to
focused
stop and
on
ask.
Mickie. Oh, and it's so unlike me to point out your flaw and then make my own mistake. That's so unlike me.
Yes. All right. Sorry, Mickey. I
Just
apologize
kidding.
for
Sorry,
interrupting.
Mickey.
But
That's right.
so go ahead,
Well, I
Jackie.
was
Now that we can see
listening.
you.
What's that?
Now that we can see you, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Mickie, I've been listening the whole time and I'm fascinated. Just for a side note, I want to just highlight the technological revolution that you have endured to go from fax to email to next, as in a very short career. And we're talking 25 years, but that's a pretty big arc of technological improvements. So when I think about what you've been able to do and how you do it, do you still need a PR newswire, or are you really able to be self-encapsulated at this point?
So unfortunately, the newswire is very important to my business today. The thing that has happened over the last 20 years is email is probably the worst way to interact with journalists today. Media databases have become commonplace, and unfortunately, when a golf club company spends $12,000 for a yearly license to a media database, and they realize there's only 2,300 golf journalists and people who write about golf and all of that, they start looking at the database and saying, who really likes to play golf? Bankers and business people. And all of a sudden they're spamming financial analysts and banking reporters who will never, ever write an article on golf clubs. And that's happening in every industry. And, journalists hate media databases. They refer to their inbox as the enemy. And so it makes it very difficult to reach them that way. So unfortunately, at the same time, journalists are expected to do more with less because newspapers, especially, aren't thriving like they used to. Craigslist destroyed the classified ads, which was their bread and butter, and job postings and stuff like that with Indeed and other things. And so, unfortunately, a lot of busy journalists are expected to write, maybe 2 or 3 articles every day or two, as opposed to 2 or 3 articles a week. And so they really just don't have time to spend hours poring through an inbox where there's all this spam and off-targeted emails. And so as a result, they rely on the news wires even more. And in the US, it's basically a duopoly now. It's PR Newswire and Business Wire as far as news wires of press releases. There's the Associated Press, there's Reuters, there's UPI, there's other types of news wires, but their business model's different. They don't transmit press releases. They may accept them, but everything that they run has been written by them, and they license that content. So a busy newspaper who doesn't have time to write about a story that's breaking with the Supreme Court might just pull that story from the Associated Press and pay a licensing fee. And so in the US, it's basically you want to make sure you're on these wires because the great thing about them is a journalist logs in, they look at their industry feed. It's very curated. They don't let a lot of off-target stuff happen there. And they can also set up keywords. So like make sure you include in my feed releases that mention this keyword or exclude releases that mention things that while I cover this industry, I don't want to talk about, say in fashion, I don't want to talk about high fashion and certain designers that aren't interested, my audience will never be interested in. And so it makes their job easier to skim that. Now, that being said, they kind of have to go to both news wires, Business Wire and PR Newswire. You don't need to be in both. My business model has changed. I am a bit more reliant on the newswire as a result of that. But, we're doing 10,000 releases a year, so we're a really good customer of PR Newswire. I'm very good about if a giant client comes through of handing them off directly to the newswire because I know that person is someone their sales team will likely want to engage with. And so my bread and butter is just helping the small businesses and the mom and pops and entrepreneurs and smaller businesses.
That being said, it sounds like what you're saying, and I don't want to jump ahead, but like the organic new press release that goes out is not a thing. Like, hey, I'm not going to spend money on this. I'm just going to put this out there, and it's a perfectly crafted press release, but no one's going to pick that up if you're not paying for it a little bit or putting some money in the game. Is that accurate?
That is correct. And now there are a lot of other sites that are out there today with wire in their name that may be as little as $69. They don't reach journalists. There's this whole thing that happened in the early 2000s, syndication. So when a press release goes out through Business Wire, PR Newswire, it shows up on Yahoo Finance, even though you're not, a business that may be in that space, but all publicly traded clients go there and it shows up in their stock tickers. But even if you're not publicly traded or you're not a banking or finance company or a business, traditional business, you still show up there. And they used to always provide these reports to people, and then they started people liking them. And so they started providing more of these reports. And it's just the press release replicated on sections of people's websites. It's become a whole industry now where for, $100, you can show up on 70 different websites. But these aren't websites that people visit. These aren't websites where journalists are ever going to see you. And so the opportunity to reach journalists isn't going to happen for generally anything under $1,000. $1,000, with the exception of eReleases, because we're the only ones out there with this partnership that we have with PR Newswire. And so there is a lot of people who do send through these other services with Wire their name, thinking that they're reaching potentially journalists, and they don't. And so that's the unfortunate thing, and a bit of education that we have to do out there in the marketplace. That with us, the same thing may happen. You send a release and you don't get any articles, but you'll never get articles if you go to these other providers, because that's not their business model. They're just in the game of syndication that some people like, but it doesn't really add anything. The goal of real PR is to get what we call earned media, and that's why a journalist writes about you. They don't copy and paste your press release, but they write original content based off your press release, and that really is what moves the needle when a journalist chooses to write about you. It's huge credibility. It's almost like an implied endorsement. And the traffic that people get from these can be substantial. The sales are usually very strong, and these customers tend to be very loyal as a result of it. It's not the same thing where they encounter a landing page on from a pay-per-click campaign where they're just very suspicious, and 99% of the people hit the back button when someone reads an article. I'm guilty of this. I read about a cool Kickstarter campaign, a guy who just wanted existing companies to offer this one little difference to their product, and they wouldn't do it. So this person's like, I just had to decide. I had to decide to do it myself. And now all of a sudden, you're pulling out your credit card and supporting someone, and maybe you don't even really need that product, but you just really are championing their story, and you have that human interest element. And that human interest element's like one of the most powerful things that happens with PR.
Yeah, so it is a pay to play kind of just to get in the game. And then on top of that, you have to have the right content to be picked up and hopefully written about. So there is beyond just the entry to the game, you need to have some good content in order to have it actually work.
Right. And, that being said, there's also PR firms out there, and, they have relied on email pitches, and a lot of them now some of them have always done phone pitches, but now they're doing phone pitches a lot more as well, and phone reminders to journalists saying, hey, you probably haven't seen this in your inbox because we know what your inbox looks like, but I sent you a pitch yesterday. And they're like, oh, can you help me try to find it? What's your domain name and stuff like that? So, PR firms are really good. They're out of the budget for a lot of small businesses and startups and entrepreneurs. And so I do tell people that there's a lot that you can do to really, make a press release shine, make it as newsworthy as possible. Make sure you're doing the types of releases that are meaningful. And even when you don't think that you are meaningful or newsworthy, you can develop newsworthy press releases and send them to the media.
I have a quick question. I am always fascinated by the concepts around PR and what's really going to get a writer to pay attention. Now, not my industry. We have a PR team, like I said, Christina, and her group that really kind of does this for us. So I'm not in the day-to-day trenches of it. But these are some things I've been told, and I'd love to know fact or fiction. One, that any kind of mention is positive. And I don't mean like all press is good press. I don't mean like that. I mean, even if it's just on one of those, I think you called them $99 services, where it's listed on some website somewhere, that's going to be positive because it's going to give you a backlink to your website. It's going to get your name out there. So true or false?
False. So
Okay.
it doesn't hurt you. I would call it neutral.
Okay.
The links are no follow links. They're not going to help you from an SEO benefit.
Okay.
Now, if your trade industry publication writes about you and provides a link to you, that's going to help. Because that's original article and content and a link going to you. But duplicate press releases on websites with links going to you aren't really going to help you. I've been told from some people that they do see a little bit of a bump initially, but Google's very candid. They're like, hey, if you're publishing press releases, we want the links to be no follow, and everybody sort of follows it. It would be in bad practice not to. So there are no follow links. It's not really materially going to help you over time. Some people like to have sort of like as seen on, and they use some of the syndicated sites to make it look like they've been on a lot of media places and things like that. And there's also people who pay to be on like Forbes blogs and stuff like that, and things like that. And I just discourage it because I'm like, yeah, you can spend $3,000 to get an article on Forbes. It's not going to be in the print publication. It's not going to be on a section on Forbes that a lot of their traffic is reading. It will get read by a few. It's definitely not like the syndication stuff where no one's going to see it. But for $3,000, you could do 4 to 6 releases with eReleases, and I've seen single press releases generate crazy numbers for people if it's engaging and it's newsworthy. I had one client that got picked up in waste management trade publication, and that person followed up with me and said, "Oh, we got a client, a city in Australia that's building 2 or 3 waste management facilities in different, I guess what we would call them counties, and it's going to be over 40 or 60 million dollars of work for us from just one press release and one pickup in a waste management magazine or trade publication." I did a campaign for Dining Bond Initiative during the pandemic. It was set up as a very short-lived effort to help restaurants that were closed. Got over 100 pickups. I have it as a case study on my website. All the big places picked it up. A lot of daily papers throughout the country picked it up. I suspect over 150 places picked it up. We just quit pulling small local papers after a while. And it generated over $10 million in revenue, and all of it just by doing a press release. And the way it worked is you would talk to the volunteers and tell them what your local favorite restaurant was if it wasn't listed, and they would try to reach out to them. And if they connected, you just give money that went directly to the local restaurant. So if you have a place that you went for your anniversary every year and you're like, I really want to help them a little bit, you would give $50 or $100 or whatever and be backed with a dining bond or sort of a gift certificate type scenario, in hopes that they'll make it those 2 weeks as we flatten the curve, which turned out to be a lot longer. But I think that one did so well because it was positive news at a time where there was a lot of uncertainty and negative news. And the media likes to balance the sentiment that's out there. And so it was a perfect time for positive news. And it was easy to get out, and it, just pushed a button for a press release and generated over $10 million in revenue to help these restaurants that were closed. And so, I see meaningful stuff that can really happen if you have a message that really resonates. And that being said, one of my things to do is to try to get people to do these more strategic types of press releases, these more meaningful ones. And, I have one that if people ever get discouraged with PR, it's like, try this. It's never failed. It's always resulted in several articles, and it's to do an industry survey or study within your industry, and pick some questions that the media would find fascinating right now. Are there trends going on in your industry? How's AI affecting your industry? What's the economic outlook? Are you hiring? Are you laying off? Just asking certain questions that people would probably want to know the answer right now. And you don't have to have a huge Rolodex. You can just reach out to a small or independent trade association. I find the larger ones very difficult to work with, but there's a lot of small and independent trade associations, most of which you don't even know, but do a little bit of research, find one that aligns with your audience and your industry where you are, and ask if they'll send out that survey link. In exchange, you'll mention them in a press release you have going out over PR Newswire in the coming weeks. Most of the time, 2/3 of the time, the first trade association we approach says yes, and they'll take it and send it to their members. I do tell them that I like to get at least 100 responses to be statistically relevant for the media. And so they'll often do a social media push or another email push if they have to get over that hump, so that they'll get that potential media opportunity for them as well. And you look at the results, you figure out what's going to surprise the industry the most and focus on one or two of those things for the press release. But go ahead and put a page on your website where you put all the questions and responses, build it out as an asset, and link to it in the press release, because busy journalists will go over there and say, what are some other potential angles that they asked here that I could build out a story. But generally, when we do this, it usually results in at least 4 articles, sometimes as many as a dozen. And it's not as difficult as it sounds. It's just, using like, I like to use SurveyMonkey, 4 questions per page. So either 8 questions total or 12, or probably no more than 16. And if you have a wild or crazy question, you can bury it on the last page, because even if they stop, you've got the responses that they've given on the prior pages. And I find it works extremely well, and it's something anyone can do. And you don't have to be an expert in your industry to do it, but after a while, you start to look like an expert in your industry by doing it.
I love that. And I think that's so accurate because we see it. And as the industry continues to shift and change, people need to be prepared for those shifts. Okay, next, true or false. Newsjacking is a great way to put yourself into the story that's happening at a national level. And I know you're going to say false, and I want to know why.
So maybe in 2005, or maybe as late as 2010. The problem is now everyone is aware of that.
Uh-huh.
I remember the Target credit card breach, and God, that might have been 6, 7 years ago.
Sure.
I had one client reach out to me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a release on this." And I said, "Let's go look." So I looked on Business Wire, PR Newswire. There's already over 1,400 press releases from security consultants that mentioned the Target credit card breach. And so that's the problem. When there's so many voices jumping on a trending topic, it's hard to stand out. There are opportunities to make it work for you. If everybody is saying the same thing, be the contrarian, because every article that gets written on that subject has the potential for you to be plugged into it, because journalists like to be fair and balanced. And if there's nobody raising their hand with a contrarian viewpoint, they often go to press with only one side. And so if you're the one person that gets recognized as the contrarian, you stand the likelihood that every article on that subject has a quote by you or something about you, because you're the one who's saying the contrarian viewpoint. Now, you have to be careful that you're not picking a position that's going to alienate you with your customer base. Because I had one client really good at being a contrarian, but he really angered his customers. So you do have to be mindful of that. And, there's also other things that you can do, like maybe layering it, making it very niche and specific. So maybe you're talking about the credit card breach, but maybe you're talking about it in context of people who sell on Etsy, or people that use Shopify, a really specific thing that targets a specific group of people that is not everybody, but just a very minute portion of it. Like, yeah, maybe you're just a mom and pop business. You only have one location. You have a credit card terminal on your counter. Are you at risk of the same thing that happened to Target? And they probably don't know. And so, those are the types of things where I think that you could make changes to that concept, and potentially get some pickup from it. But it's just like help a reporter out. They've recently folded and given up shop, and it's because it was great when very few people knew about it. But journalists quit using it because they're like, last time I did it, I had to stop looking after 2,500 people submitted, for this article I'm working on. And so I think that anytime something scales like that, it generally leads to the death of it, that it's not working any longer.
Right. I think you need to bring it back. I loved Harrow, help a reporter out. I got tons of articles out of it back in its heyday. And so maybe that could be another facet of your e-release, is to bring back a better version of that.
Well, I think that one of the things that's working is that there are organizations, like I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, EO,
Mm-hmm.
the Baltimore chapter, and they actually have their PR department working with journalists saying, when you need a quote on a particular issue, we have this whole community of journalists, we have this whole community of entrepreneurs and business owners that we can go to. And so a lot of stories that are very much like Harrow, these opportunities are coming to us, and it's because we're a smaller group, and they know that they might get a few dozen people replying that seem like a good fit, but they're not going to be inundated with thousands and just too much of a good thing. So I think that there are opportunities out there, but they have to be discreet and smaller and more curated, and that's going to be harder to do, I think, in a product format. But it was a really great thing in the beginning, and over a few years it was still pretty good, but it just is one of those things that's just very hard to scale, because the more it scales, uh, it doesn't become a resource anymore for the journalists. It becomes a hindrance.
Right. Right. No, that makes perfect sense.
Now, when you talk about Jackie, I'll jump in if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You can keep picking his brain for things that I don't know if you had 35 questions written down. They
Just 17.
okay. But as far as the actual press release goes, I mean, the traditional textbook way of writing a press release, you want the who, what, when, why, where, that kind of thing. And I think if you're promoting an event and if it's local and you're trying to get it out there, you want to keep it pretty basic. This is what it is. This is why you should go. This is, the details, that kind of thing, right? But expand it beyond that, do you always keep it in? Because a lot of times, again, what you've been taught, or what if you ask officially, is like, look, don't make it too from first person, right? Basically, you're not trying to tell the story. You're trying to provide the facts so somebody else can tell the story. But at the same time, I've heard that you want to make it easier on the journalists to be able to not have to rewrite it, and they can just take it and plug it in and just add some finesse here and there, that kind of thing. Which approach do you think is the best one? And it just depends. I would think there's 18 ways to do the same thing.
There are. So that being said, the feature approach, where you're wanting them to copy and paste it and just use a lot of the content, works with a lot of busy journalists in mostly local papers and smaller papers, maybe a little bit with some smaller trade publications. It will not work with the New York Times or Washington Post and the big guys, but it is something that I find works very well. I had a client that did bed and breakfast listings, and they would do stuff like the spookiest bed and breakfast places to stay in New England or around, Salem, Massachusetts, and they would do a lot of little top 10 romantic places for Valentine's Day in a particular state or region. And surprisingly, those would get copy and pasted and picked up in USA Today quite a bit, and some other places. So, sometimes having valuable content, rankings, top 10 lists, top things like that can work really well. I've seen where a new podcast comes into play, and they'll do a top 10 list of like their niche that they're in, and they'll put themselves as number 7, and people will look at it and say, oh yeah, I've heard of most of these. These look like really good, historical podcasts. And in there is one on Lincoln that just started that doesn't really have anything, and they'll just copy and paste it and use it. Again, probably not going to work with the big ones, but those type of Trojan horse things do work very well. And sort of that feature approach where you've written it almost like an article for people to copy and paste is something that, if you recognize this isn't going to excite the Wall Street Journals or the Washington Post of the world, but a lot of daily papers might find this really useful, interesting content, then sure, you could take more of a feature approach where you're writing it less as a traditional press release and more of like an actual story. You're still not writing it in the first person. If you do have anything to say in the first person, you're going to put it in a quote. And I always tell people quotes are one of the most overlooked parts of a press release. If a journalist is looking at 2 mediocre press releases, and by mediocre, that's like the same newsworthiness, and they're trying to figure out which one to go with, if you have an amazing quote, they know that they can write a great article around it, and that quote will lift it up. If the other one has a very mediocre quote, they know that they can write the best article there is, but that quote's going to land flat. So either they don't include it, or they include it and it just is not a great article as a result of it. So having an amazing quote, and by that, sure, it could be your creative flourish. I'm a poet, so, my way with words, but often just saying stuff as strong, as active verb, as condensed as possible. Like if you said something so perfectly that they would have to take twice as much words to paraphrase it, they're probably going to keep what you wrote. And so you don't have to be a wordsmith. You just have to say it as strong as possible, using active verbs, making it, just powerful and not safe. So many quotes just seem like they're just safe, written by committee. Say something with conviction. If you have a contrarian viewpoint, put it in there. If you have something that is just an indictment on something going on in your industry, consider putting it in there if that's the focus of the release. But if it's not, whatever it is that you're talking about, just make sure that you're just saying something very strong, very insightful, and that it's really contributing to the press release. That's a great way to stand out. One of the other ways when journalists are comparing to press releases of similar newsworthiness is, did you include a couple of images? A logo, don't bother uploading it. You get the opportunity to include two images when you send a press release with us. Stick to a picture of you, or if you have the product, candid shots work really well. You don't need a professional shot. That used to be in the past. Today, most journalists and news outlets recognize that the images that people, their audience, engage with the most online are ones that just seem natural and more candid. And so you don't need your product on blue velvet and well lit. It could just be your product on a messy desk with a coffee cup, with a customer, an actual customer just using it. And that's all you need. But a journalist knows if you've got one press release with no images and one that's got a couple images and they look kind of interesting, they know that go with that one, because a lot of the content is getting repurposed and put online. And this gives so many more opportunities for people to engage. They can come in through the image search. They can come in and see that photo. They're going to stick around, get more involved, want to read more, get more curious. And so those are all ways to sort of stand out with what might be a somewhat mediocre press release.
I am fascinated because I feel like you are really upending a lot of the tried and true practices that we've been told, but the way you're explaining it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I encounter people all the time who are just like, I hired a PR firm, we spent $30,000 and not much happened. And
Ouch.
I'll look up online and I'll see that like they only sent three of them through a newswire, which I get because newswires are expensive. But and it just didn't get any pickup. And I just feel like being creative opens you up to so many more opportunities, like the survey. It's like if I was a PR firm and I took 20 or $30,000 from someone for a year campaign, I'd make sure one of those monthlies or whatever milestone of press releases that I did was a survey. And yeah, it's a little bit of effort and work, but my God, you took a lot of money from someone and you didn't deliver anything. And that's the one thing that I find has always worked for people. It works for authors really well, nonfiction authors. Fiction is really hard to deal with press releases. But if you have like a nonfiction book, what's the subject of the book? And, how do you distinguish this book from everything else on this subject? And, that uh, world that you're writing about, what would be an interesting survey or study to do? And so having an interesting survey or study and then tying it to the book, that just does really well and is a great way to get media pickup. So I do encourage people to be creative. Maybe I get it a lot easier because I have a poetry background and my brain thinks a little bit differently, not like the obvious, more academic minded who went to either business school or journalism school. But I find just being creative, like sometimes, what are the things that you can't wait to go to a conference or trade show and talk about with others in the industry? Because you just don't find them talking about it in trade publications. Those I call those industry blind spots, and if you can tap into those, you can do really well. I've had people get amazing pickup by talking about things that their industries just happen to ignore. And you're like, oh, I don't know what that would be, but like, well, if you get a room full of other people, what are the kind of things you want to ask right now? And like, oh, I want to ask, are you having problems with receivables? Like net 30 is turning into net 90. It's like money's just drying up in our industry. And like, yeah, we're seeing that as well. That could be something that you might want to take the pulse on and talk about. I had a carpet company in New Jersey that I told them I felt really bad taking their money, but they wanted to do 12 releases in a year. And I didn't see anything newsworthy. And we were talking through a brainstorm, and I asked who their biggest enemy was. And I just thought it'd be like, Matt's Rug Emporium across the street. And they're like, no, it's the big box home improvement stores, and they're bad for the carpet industry. And here's why. And so we put that into a press release, and it did phenomenal. They got picked up, I think, in over 10 floor trade publications with the first release. And here, lightning striked again. We continue to try different approaches of how to navigate against the big box home improvement stores, how to educate people. And those articles, those press releases got turned into lots of articles at the end of a year, with the first 5 press releases doing nothing. With the remaining 7 press releases, we got picked up in, I think, over 20 some places, including their local newspaper and New Jersey Magazine, which was a big high-end consumer magazine in their market. And so, and they were smarter than me. I was like, a lot of these are trade publications. I don't know that that's going to help you because your audience, your customers aren't reading that. And they said, oh no, but look at what we've been doing. They put them all together in what they called a brag book. And every time they gave someone a quote, they said, we may not come in the cheapest, but we do a superior job. You're not going to have to move all your furniture out in 2 years, and have your carpet restretched or seams fixed like some of the other companies, particularly big box home improvement stores do. And here we are in Floor Trade Weekly. Here we are in New Jersey Magazine. Here we are in the local paper. And all of a sudden, they started closing, I think it was either 14 or 17% more of those sales consultations by just adding a minute of conversation and showing them that brag book and just thumbing through it. They never read all the articles. They just looked at the headlines. They looked at where they were being picked up. And at the end of the day, consumers are sitting in their home trying to figure out, who do we go with here? And they're like, well, this one's $200 or $300 more, but I feel very comfortable with them. They've been recognized nationally. Been in the local paper. These are people who are serious about their reputation, and they're recognized, nationally. And these other places, they're not. And so that works really well and shows the huge credibility boost and signal of trust that real articles and media creates for people.
I think this is the time of the show where, because we have to do it in every show now, it's programmed, it's part of life that we all talk about AI. In your interview notes, I read PR in the AI era, how to stand out with journalists or drowning in content. I think that's a very real question when it comes to this. And I'm curious how that's going to affect your industry. But nowadays I can jump in and say, hey, write me a press release about this. Now it's going to be very generic. It's going to write it. It's going to sound fine. It's going to be formatted properly. But like you said earlier, it's not going to get into it's not going to take an opposing side. It's not going to have a strategy behind it. There's a lot of reasons why that's not good. I know that, but I don't think the world doesn't know that yet. And it's so easy to produce content, and we are flooded with content right now. It's like, it's everywhere. And now it's so easy to do it that it's just more and more and more. This is not just PR. This is across the level of everything. So what are your thoughts?
So I say, if you're not a great writer, you can lean on AI to write a press release. The great thing is, journalists don't care whether AI wrote it or not. And it's not like you're posting on your website, though you may put press releases on there. I find if it gets you a well-written press release, which is what it can do, use it. But never tell it to write a press release and let it decide what to write about it. I approach AI with already a thought-out, newsworthy idea. And I approach it and say, here's my idea for a press release. Here's a little background about my company. And how would you structure this press release? And then I take it and say, okay, let's start with the headline of this press release. Give me 5 options. And, if you really like one, you can go with that. If you don't, say, hey, I really want you to focus more on this angle. And then I take it opening paragraph and then I go and spend some time with the quote. And sometimes I feel like the quote's an area where you may just want to make sure that the human element is in there, that it's really strong, fits your voice, and go with that. But I find that AI can certainly help write. I find the writing that AI does is very good, very competent, but it's bad at the ideas. And so don't use it for the idea. You want to go into it knowing exactly the topic of what you want the press release to be about, because AI has been trained on all the bad press releases that don't generate earned media. So you want to focus on the ones that are more likely to get picked up and are more likely to result in that earned media. But feel free to lean on it. Feel free to use it to write it, but it's not really that great at coming up with the ideas. And I wouldn't recommend that.
Michael, how do you feel about that?
No, I agree. I just think it's, like I said, it's there. It's not going away. People have access to it. And it used to be it was in the hands of a few. Now it's in the hands of all, basically, if you want to have that. It's the free version is very good. And there's so many different opportunities to do that. I just think it's a lot of times you end up with a lot of mediocre content. It's very vanilla. It's very doesn't get into the meat of anything. And if you get really good at it, you can drive it. But then again, is that authentic? I think authenticity still plays a role in this world and in this game that we play, the PR game, the marketing, advertising, all those things, being authentic and having a true voice, and I think that's important. So, yeah, you can throw a bunch of stuff out there, but is that going to get you back what you need? Generally not. I mean, it can start the conversation, it can get you to a certain point, but what I'm finding more and more is that there's always room for a rewrite. That's where editing comes in. I think we're going to turn more into editors than writers in the future. Editing content versus writing it from scratch, because we're going to start to lose that ability to actually write for ourselves.
Yeah,
Sad but
I
true.
agree.
Jackie?
I'm just waiting to see if you have any other thoughts on AI because I know how much you love it.
No, I do. I use it. I think it's important to be part of the conversation with that. But again, it's like a stagecoach, and with a team of horses, then they lose the reins, and now they're heading towards the cliff, and they're going at full speed, and they know it's going to happen. Everybody sees it, and nobody can stop it right now. And it's like, where does that all end? It's like we're adjusting so rapidly. I mean, we have clients calling us from different, we have a lot of different industries that we work within, and everybody is talking about how it's affecting them and how they're going to adjust. And luckily they're thinking about it and they're talking about it, but there has to be some adjustment. If you're just pretending that it's not going to affect you, then, somebody was saying, well, I'm a plumber, so I don't have to worry about that. Well, yeah, until they have a robot that crawls under houses for you and you don't have to do it anymore, and has a camera and it can adjust things. What I'm saying? Like that's, we are moving towards all of those things. And so it's something that it's not today, but we have to think about it.
Yeah.
Michael, are you really worried about the plumber robot?
No, I just read an article about it. So
Oh, okay. Because I feel like physical labor still has a long ways to go before they're replaced by AI.
Yeah, I'm not doom and gloom or anything. It's just,
Now, don't lie to our new friend Mickie.
I mean, have you seen it personally, Mickie, in your process? I mean, how do you use AI for yourself? I mean, is it as a starter? Is it, I just don't deal with it right now. I use it for research only. Like, how does it play in your workflow and workspace?
I use it sometimes for brainstorming. I don't
Mhm.
use it a lot. It's just not an area that I spend a lot of time in. I recognize a lot of people saying, "Oh, you got to embrace it more and spend more time," but I just find that I don't need it. For me personally, I mean, I'm a
Mhm.
writer. It's what I do. Sometimes I want to brainstorm an issue. I find it useful, but I don't want it writing my content. I don't want it replacing me and my voice and my tone and things like
Mhm.
that. Emails that I send to customers are, I don't want that going through AI. But that's my line in the sand. I'm a writer, and so I recognize I'm going to have a different perspective than other people. I know some people that just can't help themselves. They feel like they're powerless. They can't write anything. thing. And I feel like if it helps them, I don't have a problem with it. But again, I would encourage them to make sure it's your ideas, your vision, let it know your tone, what, things about you. So it doesn't come across as like, oh, I know this person, but this content looks like it was written by, a lawyer or so, not them. It doesn't have their personality, doesn't have their flair, doesn't have any of their voice or anything like that. So I think that's one of the potentials where it's a mismatch. And I think that people will crave authenticity, will crave, more unique voices and things that are out there, which I think AI is going to have a harder time with, and it's going to come across as a lot of stuff just being AI bland. But that being said, there are I think ways to incorporate it. But one of the things you have to be very mindful is AI makes up stuff. And so I always tell people, when you're doing a press release, are there opportunities to take publicly available data points and put them in there? Because it helps to anchor things. Like if you have let's say, a logistics software solution that helps transportation companies, and you take a data point like 67% of new transportation companies fail in their first 5 years because they don't achieve profitability. That really shows the stakes of why maybe a solution like yours is so important. But you want to make sure that if you're leaning on AI for those data points, that you verify them out there, because AI just, they call it hallucination. I call it just lying. It'll just make up something that they know you're looking for and sounds good, but they'll have references, and there's no way to find any of them. And so you just have to be careful. AI wants to do a good job to the point that it's willing to just make stuff up. And so I always tell people, when there's numbers and data, go out there and verify it. And there's a couple lawyers who I've heard may be disbarred because they've used AI, specifically ChatGPT, for cases to reference in their briefs and positions that turned out they're not even real cases, and that's looks really bad, to the point that judges have referred it to the bar. They feel it's so atrocious to lean on a machine that you didn't even double check that this is an actual case. And so it's just things to be mindful of, because I think that once we give up too much, and we don't put the critical thinking and dot the I's and cross the T's, it's what's the use of us being even involved as humans? So that's one of the things I just tell people to be mindful of.
It's all, to me, starting to finally come together. The way that we're going to use AI, the way that it should hopefully improve for the people who do need it, who aren't great writers, who need a brainstorming partner. Um, I have a different approach, I think, in the way I think about it than Michael. I'm excited by it. I think it's a great um, turn in our industry. It's the same way I remember feeling when I first realized the internet and how it was going to work. Um, it feels like that again for me. So I'm excited about that. Mickie, your insights on PR and the industry and how companies can get stories written about them, I think have been invaluable for our listeners, which Michael's convinced no one stays and listens the entire time, but I'm certain that they do. So for our listeners that are still around, how do they find you? How do they connect with you? How do you want to be reached out to?
Sure. So my website's eReleases.com. All my social media is on the lower right, including my direct LinkedIn, which is like one of the few social medias that I actually handle myself. And I do have a free masterclass. It's less than an hour long. It's not a huge commitment, but it goes through the 3% of press releases I find that are meaningful and that you can replicate doing a newsworthy press release. I have it at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN, and it's less than an hour long, and there's some accompanying materials with it. But it basically is the type of press releases you could do that are meaningful and likely to get results. So if you build a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases, and if you take a year, year and a half, even 2 years to do those 6 to 8 releases, and you follow that model and do those types of releases, I guarantee you that you'll probably see 2 or 3 of them that actually succeed with really good measurable results. And that's how you measure PR. You measure it by a campaign, not a single press release. And learn from what works, learn from what didn't work, and just keep trying. And when you find something that works, you could continue to get that lightning to strike again and again. I had one client who does those surveys, and every time they do a survey and they send out the press release, they get 8 to 14 articles, and they do it across 20 verticals a year. And they've been doing it for several years, and they get so many links over the last 5 years doing that, that they rank incredibly high. And they also get many calls by journalists in all of these vertical industries saying, "Hey, these two companies are consolidating. Do you have some comments about that? About your users and things like that who use their software and solutions and stuff like that." So it's really just a great way to stand out, and there's so many opportunities to take advantage. So again, that's eReleases.com/PLAN plan. And I recommend people to do that. And it's a great place to get started. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to my staff. Only editors. We have no salespeople. There's no commissions. And we're pretty much straight shooters if we feel like we can be a help. And we're willing to look at whatever you have and sort of guide you through the process.
That is awesome. And I heard you very clearly say 6 to 8 releases over the course of a year, year and a half. So my thought about sending one a day, you're telling me is wrong. I'm noting that. Christina will appreciate it because I'm always like, more. And so you've done good work today.
Thank you.
Seriously, I don't daily feels right to me. But no, Mickie, you've been great. Thank you for your insight and your input and a free masterclass. Like, who doesn't beat that? That's awesome. I hope everyone connects with you and does some downloads and takes advantage of the resource.